Greetings from the Tech Cave, Fenris here, and today we have another large box. Now, if you recall from our last Fenris Finds video, it was a collaborative project with another YouTuber who goes by the name Scruffy Looking RGB, and in that video, we wanted to answer the burning question that was, how many junk Super Famicoms could you purchase with 100 USD directly from Japan? Mainly because purchasing junk Super Famicoms on eBay is getting a little up there, and I wanted to see how much you could get with $100 if you just go straight to the source. Well, in that video, I had also mentioned that Scruffy had another package ready for me because I wanted to get more than just Super Famicoms. And that's exactly what we have here. This just came in the mail like a couple days ago, and I was able to find some time to film this, so let's get it open. Okay, so we got a few items here, and let's just break it down, shall we? So, starting things off, we have a couple of OG Famicoms. Now, one is definitely more worse for wears than the other, but that's okay. I don't mind my systems being a little scruffy looking, if you will. But, more importantly, these are FF variant Famicoms. Now, why is that important? Well, barring any sort of reshell work, the FF would indicate that these contain GPM motherboards. Now, GPM motherboards in the context of OG Famicoms are known to have audio imbalancing issues, mainly related to expansion audio. So the expansion audio is actually louder than the CPU audio in these systems. So games like Akumajou Densetsu, for example, would be significantly louder with the VRC6 audio, whereas games like Gimmick, on the other hand, which were made with the GPM in mind, will actually sound proper. And that's kind of the sad reality when it comes to making expansion audio mods. One game may sound fine while the other doesn't. It kind of becomes a game of tug of war, like which do you want to sound more balanced? Now, the only real good solution to solve both issues would be to just get an EverDrive N8 Pro and dial your settings based on your preferences. In terms of like actual hardware mods, you could do like a potentiometer pot, but that doesn't really look very good, now does it? So yeah, when it comes to purchasing Famicoms, on the other hand, there are a few variants that you should keep in mind. First up, we have something like this. This is a non-FF Famicom, so this will contain motherboards like the HVC CPU 07 or earlier. So these will have properly balanced audio, again, barring any reshell. Now, one other thing to note about this one, though, is this one has a smooth bottom, which would indicate that this was released much closer to launch era, because at some point in time, they started replacing these smooth bottoms with textured bottoms, as shown here with these FF Famic... Ooh. Yeah, we got a bit of a crack here, but that's okay. I got extra bottoms. But yeah, later Famicoms had these textured bottoms, whereas earlier ones had a smooth bottom. And I would show you an example of a non-FF Famicom with a textured bottom, but unfortunately, I don't have one on me at this moment. But yeah, that's just something to kind of look out for. But if you're especially lucky, you may find something like this. Now, this just looks like another non-FF Famicom, right? Think again. This is a launch era Famicom, and you can tell because it still has the square buttons. Now, they replaced the square buttons for these Famicoms rather quickly, at least as far as I can tell, mainly because even though these square buttons are really neat, they're just straight membranes and they are known to fail. So as a result, they had to replace them with hard plastic circle buttons. But you may also find launch systems where the controllers were already replaced with hard plastic circle buttons due to this failure rate. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case for this one. So in terms of like collectability, this is probably the most collectible of the OG Famicoms. But yeah, just something to keep in mind if you're buying OG Famicoms. Try to find, if you want one that is properly balanced right off the gate, try to find one without the FF and is stock. Because chances are they might have been reshelled. So just make sure that it is a stock Famicom. So that out of the way, we can move on to the next items. And that's these two right here. Now, a friend of mine has been getting me into Ultraman recently, and while I haven't really watched much of it yet, I have been really into like the action of it, so I figured I'd pick up a couple games based on the franchise. So what I have here is Ultraman and Ultra 7. Now, this one is not to be confused with Ultraman Towards the Future, which was released here in the States. Rather, this is a port of a Japanese-only arcade game. And Ultra 7 here is just a Super Famicom exclusive. So from what I could tell from screenshots, these are basically like rudimentary fighting games. So I might be able to get into it much easier since I don't really need English to play these. But I wouldn't be surprised if the fighting system on these were rather clunky. But hey, you know what? I'm just happy to have a couple of these games in my collection. And finally, we have this here. Now, one of my family members had reached out to me saying that they wanted an HDMI modded GameCube for their entertainment setup. So I figured, this one doesn't, there we go. So I figured that I'd reach out to Scruffy and be like, hey, could you pick me up a junk Nintendo GameCube? And, you know, he obliged and he was able to find one for me. Now, this one is obviously like really yellow. But as you can see, it's also a DOL001, so this should make for an easier HDMI mod. But even though it's kind of yellow, I might be able to restore it, but chances are, once Muramasa releases his new shells, I'll probably just go for that instead. So yeah, that's my pickup from Japan. But we're not done yet, obviously. We need to hook up these systems to make sure that they work. So let's move the camera down and get to it. Okay, so now we're at desk level, we can begin testing the Famicoms. So if you take a look at a Famicom, you'll see that it has an AC adapter input, a TV game selector switch, a channel 1 and 2 selector switch, and an RF port. Yes, these systems do not support AV output, it only has RF. And the reason for that is because back in 1983, RF was just the gold standard for consumer sets. So unfortunately though, it does prove to be a problem when testing these systems these days, because most digital displays don't even have analog inputs anymore. So we have to use some sort of external scaling device to use analog devices on modern digital displays. And in the case of RF, we need some sort of demodulator to even use that on a scaler. So the cheapest demodulator you can get your hands on is just an old tried and true VHS player or VCR. You can pick these up for like 10, 12 bucks. You may be able to find them for like 5 or even free if you're lucky. Now, when purchasing a VHS player, you want to make sure that you can tune to channel 95 or 96. Now, I know the back label here says channel 1 and 2. Channel 1 and 2 in Japan is not the same as channel 1 and 2 in North America. Channel 1 and 2 in Japan overlays with channels 95 and 96 here in North America. So we're just going to punch in 95. We're set to 95 and we're just going to begin testing. So let's pull this one aside. I already have this one hooked up. Now, one other thing to know, when setting up your Famicom, make sure that the TV game selector switch is set to game. If you set it to TV, you'll get nothing. And when you set your VHS player to channel 95, set the selector switch to channel 1. You can set it to channel 2, but then you have to tune it to 96 on the VHS player. And I find that you get more consistent results with testing when setting it to channel 1 on the Famicom. So channel 95 is best. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a proper NTF2 test cartridge for the Famicom. I am looking to get one in the future, but for now, I'm just gonna have to test with a game that allows me to test all buttons on a controller. So I got here my copy of Kage, and we're just gonna fire it up. Ooh. Well, the system does seem to work, but it has a rather nasty buzzing sound. Oops. Let's reset. Gotta set it to 2-player. Oh, my finger was still on the reset button. Left, right, down. So that works. Ugh. You can hear as soon as I grab the 2nd-player controller, the audio is getting worse. But it does work. Okay, so I'm not sure if the microphone picked it up, but you might have heard that the Famicom has some really aggressive buzzing going on. And that's because of player 2 here. So this microphone sucks. If it is even faintly dirty, or if the capacitor in this controller goes bad, the microphone just starts buzzing like crazy. It doesn't matter if it's all the way down or all the way up. It's just gonna start buzzing really aggressively. So unfortunately, this does mean that we need to clean up the player 1 and player 2 controller, which I was gonna do anyways. So that's gonna be a fun time. But hey, you know what? At the very least, this Famicom does work. So let's just pop out copy of Kage, unplug everything, move this aside, and I'm just gonna unwrap our other Famicom here. Put like 3 different wrapping materials on this thing. A rubber band, tape, and cellophane. So we're just gonna plug in. What the hell was that? Whatever. So we're just gonna plug in our AC adapter. Make sure it's set to game. It is. Set to channel 1. It is. Get the cabling backed up. And then we're just gonna plug in our copy of Kage. Green screen. So let's try reseating the game a few times and see if we can bring it to life. It just might be dirty. Yep, there we go. And we still got the buzzing issue. So far, the controller seems to work. Yep. Both Famicoms seem to work. Unfortunately, both Famicoms also have buggy player 2 controllers. So that's no big deal. Just means that we're going to need to clean these up and solve that player 2 problem. But yeah. Pretty good. We got 2 working Famicoms out of that. So now we can move on to testing the GameCube. Okay, so we have the GameCube all hooked up here, and as you can see, we got the power cable, the AV cable, as well as the Retrobit Prism component cables. Now, I am aware that you can purchase HDMI adapters that fit into the digital out port. Unfortunately, I don't have any with me at the moment, so this will just have to do. Now, a common failure point that I want to bring up with GameCubes is the disk drive. Now, I've always seen people say that if the disk drive is not reading any games, then it has to be a laser issue. That's actually not true, and a lot of the times, and it's not just the GameCube, I've also experienced it with like the PlayStation, PlayStation 2, original Xbox, but I would suggest checking the capacitors around the disk drive area first before assuming that it's a laser issue. You may find that a lot of those capacitors are just spent because they're around a very hot area of the board. So as a result, you're gonna have like maybe inconsistent reads, because then you'll find that like if you leave the system on for like 20, 30, or 40 minutes, it'll suddenly start reading games again. So if you find that to be the case, then I would suggest changing out the capacitors first before changing out the laser. Now, if you wait 20, 30, 40 minutes and it's still not reading games, then yes, it might be a laser issue, but I'd still advise changing the capacitors out on your disk drive. So, since this is a Japanese GameCube, we are going to need a Japanese game. And I do happen to have one here. This is PC Genjin. So let's pop that open. Come on. Looks like we are getting an error message. Let's see if we can access the menu by opening the lid. Nope. Is the lid sensor bad? Yeah, it looks like I'm stuck on an error message. That's interesting. I wonder if the lid sensor might be giving me issues, which is why I'm not able to access the main menu, or even like an option to... That is an issue. You know what, just for curiosity's sake, let's remove the component cables. See what that does. I mean, it's probably not going to do anything, but, you know. Yeah. I can't even access the menu. Interesting, interesting. So, yeah, it looks like I'm going to have to do some further investigations with this GameCube, because I can't even test a game on it. So, that kind of sucks, but whatever. Now, as for these two cartridges right here, I'm not going to bother, like, taking them apart and cleaning them up and then hooking them up for this video. I might do that as, like, a short, but, you know, it's basically the same kind of rule with, like, the Famicom cartridge maintenance video. The only difference is that they're Super Famicom cartridges, and instead of tabs, you got screws. So... big whoop. But anyways, yeah, that's really it. So Scruffy sent me a couple of working Famicoms, a non-working GameCube, and a couple of really nice Ultraman games. So yeah, thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. And well, until the blue moon rises, I'll see you next time.